I came up with a date. I don't know how it dropped into my spirit or my consciousness or whatever. August 4th, which is Barack Obama's birthday, right? I didn't know none of this. So I only gave myself 2 months to plan. Anybody, if I ask anyone, and I used to often ask people, like, well, how long do you think it's going to take to plan a walk from Chicago to the White House? They told me at least a year. I gave myself 2 months. And so, how do you start the walk? You have to walk.
Welcome to the Prison Cells Podcast. I am your host, Tank Johnson. Today we're joined by my two esteemed colleagues and one wonderful guest. Start with you, John. How you doing?
Hi, Tank. I'm doing very well today.
Robbie, how you doing?
Doing great, Tank. Excited to be here and talk to our guest today.
Good. And today we're joined by a good friend of mine, a wonderful Chicagoan. He is an activist, he is a community leader, and he is a man that has displayed tremendous moral courage. And that man is Demetrius Nash, or we like to call him D.Nash. D.Nash, what up, brother?
Man, and it's a pleasure to be here today. I never miss an opportunity to talk about my story, and I am the living experience of having gone and been incarcerated and came out on the other side and have done um, work that has really changed lives and has changed my life in a big way, as far as activism, as far as speaking out, protesting, and just talking about my stint in jail in the prison system of 8 years.
Okay, now I want to jump right into it, right? Because your story is just so captivating, and it's one of the things that kind of brought us together. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
literally.
right. And I just kind of had to support it and be a part of it. And I want to talk to you about like a shift in mindset, right? So when a person specifically in Chicago has a particular status within the community, whether that's like whatever in the community, um, and then you go away and you come back and you have a shift. What was that experience like when you kind of rejoined the community with a different mindset? Like, how were you received by the people?
My proving ground was actually my incarceration, right? Because you come into the federal system or you come in any jail system, they hear the stories about you. And my transformation actually changed while I was incarcerated. Because I no longer talked about the ills that I was doing, and my whole mindset shifted from being part of the problem into finding solutions for the problem. Being one of the faces of the change that I wanted to see. And so at first, I was still doing bad in jail. I still wanted to do what I wanted to do. I ended up getting caught with a cell phone. I was at the federal camp, John. I'm at the federal camp in Terre Haute, Indiana, and I actually got caught with a cell phone. And I did from December to like March. That was like 6, 7 months in the hole in segregation. And that's where it started to change. And I was just like, I have to start doing something else. And then I started meeting men that were smarter than me. And so when I came home to a Chicago that was calling itself Chirac, and we're savages. And I don't come from that town. I come from Windy City. I come from Chi-Town. I come from Chicago. And I looked at it and I just knew I had to be part of the change that I saw and wanted to see in my community. A strong black man that wasn't scared to hold our community accountable, because I started speaking out and protesting when Laquan McDonald was shot by the police officer Jason Van Dyke. But during that same year, we were speaking out protesting about Jason Van Dyke. Our community had shot each other over 700 something times, murdered, and shot ourselves over 4,400 times. So I can't just talk about the police violence without talking about the things that we do to ourselves and the crimes and the stuff that we do in our community that feeds the privatization of these prisons and feeds this whole system.
Yeah, one of the one of the things that we highlight specifically on the Prison Sales podcast is organizations that have like-minded causes and where there's synergy. But I thought it was important to highlight the the lone wolves, the guys who are out there just standing on the front lines, not particularly attached to any association, but they're doing the work. Can you tell me what that experience is like? Just kind of being a one man activist, but you support so many causes.
Yeah. So, for example, violence prevention here in Chicago and throughout the country is a really big thing because it's just a problem, right? And I was talking to John on the phone, for example, and this is I literally it's so important that you said that. Um, I literally was intentional about not joining the organization because what tends to happen in getting a job with organizations, you get the job begins to pay for the things. So now because they're getting street guys, right? They're getting guys from the prison system, they're getting guys who need this job, right? So you get the job and it start paying for things. It start paying for your house. It start helping you take care of your kids. But then now you really can't really go at the organization because now you caught up in the web of you need this job. So you're not gonna really shake the tree. You're not really gonna go at them at times when you really need to say, "Hey, look, no, y'all not doing this right," or this and that, because you stuck in this job. So I've been very intentional about that, but it allowed me to be able to go to all these organizations. For example, my little brother works for an organization that's grassrooted in the Bronzeville area, right? So within this last week, one young man was shot 10 times. He was shot twice in the face and 8 times in the body, right? He's 15 years old. Within an hour or two of that shooting, another young man was murdered. He was 16 years old. Then a young lady got shot that day. That was that day. Day before yesterday, a young man got shot 24 times in our community. 15 years old on 67th and Western. So this is how I'm important to these organizations and what you just said, not being attached to them. So my little brother called me from his organization. Now it's organizations in Roseland, Inglewood, and all these, but for all intents and purposes, they're fighting for the same funding and they really don't mess with each other. They should, but they don't, man. And that'd be the tragedy in all this. So, but they all know they can call D.Nash. And I have ties throughout the whole community. So my little brother called me and said, man, the young man that was murdered on 33rd in Prairie got shot 10 times. We're looking for his mom. I have contacts. So she's from 29th and State. Those are the different gang affiliations. So I call my little homies down there. I say, man, I'm looking for the mom of that young man, so I can give it to the organization because the organization wanted to pay for the funeral. Now, if I'm attached to a cred, Arnie Duncan has cred. It's a very big organization. He got a lot of monies from Steve Jobs' wife. Is doing some incredible work. Some people have something to say about it. But guess what? D.Nash could mess with Ernie Duncan. He could go mess with Aklavist. He could go mess with the organization in Bronzeville, Roseland. All of them care about me, and all of them know that I'm just a phone call away. So, long story short, I call Corey Brooks, and he's about to get a funeral, do the funeral, and it's about to be paid for. So it's very important, not to sit in these organizations. And because what I find in these organizations, they have their own culture. They don't want to mess with people, and it instead of us all working together, it's like we work against each other, or we just shun each other and stay away from each other. Whereas I'm rowing the boat up to all the islands, getting all the information. Um, and holding them accountable, because non for profit is very profitable in our community, but the results aren't the results that we need in the community aren't trickling down to those boots on the ground pieces. And a young man like me, I have an idea or whatever. Yeah, I don't have the non for profit and all that together, and I'm getting that together. But when you see a young man that has been on the front line, some things aren't going to be a tax write off. Some things, I'm very close with Reverend Jackson, right? And I study our elders and what they did right. They had lawyers. What they did right, our athletes and those the Muhammad Ali's and all those the Harry Belafontes. They knew that that wasn't their lane. Now everybody wants speaks about everything, but they knew that wasn't their lane. So guess what? They was paying for housing for Martin. They was giving the monies to them because this was the voice in that lane. They just empowered that lane. They stayed in what they were doing. They were musicians. They were musicians. They were athletes. They was all those great things. But they were great. They understood they was great in their lane. They didn't have to do all things. And so I'm just glad that I can have a friendship like you, walk from Chicago to the White House, and in fact, a little bit of our story is kind of crazy, bro, because the situation you went through, I had to tell you within our first conversation that the guy who supposedly did something to your friend was a friend of mine. Remember that conversation? you know, and that was how close it was. And I just didn't feel right with not out with because I didn't know the feelings you had pertaining to going through that and having lost a friend to know that yeah, he's doing a lot of this great work, but he's a friend to the guy that got convicted for murdering my friend. And look at the love that we have with each other,
Yeah,
so
it's a powerful story, man. And I wanted to kind of segue into that amazing journey that you went on to combat gun violence in Chicago.
mhm.
You want to talk about moral courage. You want to talk about laying it all on the line to walk from Chicago to the White House, to bring awareness to gun violence. It's just something that's remarkable. Can you tell me a little bit about that journey?
Well, it goes back to my incarceration. I used to fast and I pray, I'm non at this point. And while I was incarcerated, I was non-denominational. I have a Christian background, and I just knew I, I was more spiritual than anything. Right? I just knew that it was something greater than myself. I can't really put a name on it. I can't really, really at this point, but I knew it was something outside of myself that was covering me in my darkest hours, and even when I was incarcerated. Right? So every Saturday I would pray and ask God, for for guidance, the universe for guidance. So when I came home, I had been speaking out and protesting ever since Laquan McDonald tape was released. And I will never forget May 27, 2017. It was the day before my dad's birthday. And I I prayed, I asked God, I say, we done got Jason Van Dyke locked up. What is my next steps for the liberation of our people, and just to elevate myself in a way where I can be a voice for the voiceless. And I literally prayed and I fast and I asked God, and I literally woke up May 28th, and I tapped my girlfriend and I said, I'm about to walk to Washington. She say Washington Park, because that's a park in Chicago. I say, no, I'm about to walk to Washington, D.C. And and I didn't know how I was gonna do it. I started from zero funds. I was working construction at the time, but I knew God had put something in me that was greater than myself. And having been once part of the problem and having feeling obligated to be um part of obligation to be part of the solution, I was obedient, bro. And it was a journey that took me from my grandmother's house on 79th and Kimbart, August 4th, 2017, and I made it to the White House September 25th. I walked through Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. I didn't get an N word. I didn't get the white people in those rural communities came out, supported me. I never forget. I was on a dirt road, bro. I was in a cornfield in Indiana somewhere. Somewhere along the journey, and you see a car coming from a mile away. All I see is dust. So it was a lady that stopped. Of course, she went past me. She bags up. She had to be 80 something years old. And the white lady said, "Are you okay?" Because of course they don't. No one walks on these roads, especially not a black young man.
Right.
She's like, "Are you okay? You sure you don't want me to take you nowhere?" I'm like, "No, ma'am." I say, "I'm walking for gun violence, and I know you probably see the news, and right now Chicago is one of the really the murder capital of the United States right now, and I'm just walking and determined to get there to bring more awareness to the gun violence, not just from the police, but also the violence that we do against each other. The gun violence needs to stop." And she was like, "Yes." And I'll never forget that lady gave me $20. And it meant so much to me because Derrick Rose had gave me $7,000. But stranger giving me 20 was just as important as the 7,000 that I got from her. Because I don't know her financial state. I don't know if this was her last $20. But it was things like that, that was along my journey that helped me and knew that. And then every day I was walking, my friends was dying. My friends was still being murdered in the streets of Chicago. Every day I was walking, every step was for them. And so yes, when you talk about courage, when you talk about determination, because at one point I was on IV for 3 days. I got to like Fort Wayne, Indiana, and my body shut down on me. I was on IV for 3 days. I lost about 25, 30 pounds doing the walk because you got to think I'm walking 20 miles a day, and that's almost a marathon. So, but it was something greater than myself, man. I was determined to never go back. So I was walking away from the prison system, never to go back there. It was symbolic of that. It was also symbolic of me shedding a lot of things that I had went through in my life, bro. Like I cried on that journey. I reflected on that journey. I was looking at God's creation. You have to think I was walking through mountains, and I'm in awe of what man had done without technology. They didn't created roads through mountains, and you seeing just the awe and the beauty of what God has created, and you something is greater than you, and it pushed me all the way there, bro. And man, John Lewis and Robin Kelly did my press conference, and he wrote a speech about me, man, and it was just incredible. I'll never be the same for the journey, and it gave me not just a love for our people, it gave me a love for humanity, bro. It gave me an undeniable love and an undeniable courage to speak out. What John Lewis say, get in good trouble for the right reasons, and it doesn't, the judicial system and the justice system and the prison system affects us all. It does not affects, yeah, it disproportionately affects black and brown, but it's some white. Look, if you listen to the guy out of Detroit, the young man, white, oh shoot, excuse me, white boy Rick. The government used him at 14 to be an informant. He stayed in jail down there 30 years. 30 years after they used him as a child, bring down and use him, and then to cover up all they mess, they stuck him in prison from a child, 17 years old, for damn it 30 years. I don't have the exact math, but it was almost 30 years because he had been one of the longest prisoners in the United States history as far as from being a juvenile on into his adulthood. So, man, it's a thing, bro. It's a thing.
At APP, we believe the only way to truly end for-profit prisons in the United States is to challenge the constitutionality of private for-profit prisons in the courts. And with your help and moral courage, we will succeed. Completely donor-funded, we ask for your support. Your tax-deductible contribution will provide vital funding for building the infrastructure necessary to win a fight of this scale. And every dollar will bring us one step closer to our goal of abolishing private prisons. Please join the fight today by visiting abolishprivateprisons.org and click the donate button at the top of the site. And of course, like, share, and subscribe to the Prison Cells podcast from wherever you listen. Now back to the discussion.
Yeah, so through God, man, and when you talk about courage, bro, I wouldn't have did it. I couldn't have done it without going through what I've gone through. And I'm not gonna say prison was all that bad for me because at that time in my life, bro, I didn't know if I was gonna live another day. I didn't know if I was gonna get life in jail, and I was comfortable with that. I had made a decision to go in the streets, and I took on everything that came with the street. And actually, for me, I tell people prison saved my life. It allowed me to get back to the schoolboy me. You know, no, do I think these people need all these long jail sentences and all that? But it helped me because I wanted to rehabilitate myself. See, jail rehabilitated me because I wanted it to rehabilitate me. I was determined to not return. When you talk about the jail system, as me and John was talking about, what is it, John? 80 something percent recidivism rate by year three?
I'm not sure what it is nationally. Um, it's very high.
It's
Now,
80 something percent. I know with dealing with the federal system, it's definitely 80 something percent, if not even more, that you're going to be back in prison within 3 years. And here I am going on 9 years of being home and free.
now, you were in the federal system, right?
Yes, sir.
You're in federal public prisons. Uh, were you able to turn yourself around by yourself, or did you have help?
I mean, no one does anything for by themselves, bro. No one. I'm not. I don't subscribe to that. I still have big homies like Tank that can call me and can check me and tell me I'm doing wrong. So no one does anything on this earth by themselves. So of course I had help. I had a praying grandmother. I had a father. I had a mother, and I had men that was in the federal system that saw something in me that I didn't always see in myself, and they took a liking to me and they planted seeds in me, and they held me accountable. Oh, bro, you can't do this, you can't do that. And when I was at you got to understand when it comes to the federal system, you have your politicians, you have a lot of your white collar crime guys, right? Go to the federal system. So they come from a different lifestyle. They come from a lifestyle that's not about all this violence and that comes with the drug trade and all those things. So I was around men that were a lot smarter than me, that cared about me, that planted seeds, that gave me a different view about the world, and I was just determined to be better and do better and to be an example. And I was determined to come home and save lives. I was just determined, and so um yeah, and I didn't do it alone. Like I have a support system. I have a Tank Johnson that calls me and hold me accountable now, and is a living example of a man that's doing the right thing and hold me accountable. And so, that's what I tell a lot of guys who come from the system, man. Get around people that are where you want to be. Get around people that are going to hold you accountable. You that won't amen your BS. Because a lot of times that's what these young men come home to. They come home to a broken home. They come home to a lady that's waiting for them to sell drugs again to bring their money. The family is waiting on them to come home. And I had that in my family because they were used to me being the breadwinner and they wasn't accustomed to having to support me. And I had to figure it out. It was lonely. When you talk about a man, I don't have no smut on my name. I don't have the snitch jacket. I don't have a person that told things that got people in jail. So I left at the top of the game. My guys in the projects was waiting for me to come home and how to connect. I went to the federal system, and the federal system is looked at as you go down there with the Mexicans, you go get with the drug cartels and all that, which you can do federal system because at one point I was in El Paso, Texas, that sat right on the border. There was so many Mexicans coming in there, and I could have did the wrong thing, but you got to make the right decision. You got to decide as a man: are you going to be continue to do the same thing and expect different results, which is insanity, or are you going to really do something different and get different results? You got to do something new, and
Right.
so.
What? Yeah. One of the things that that our podcast we highlight is the injustice that is privatization of prisons and the financial incentive to incarcerate people and getting paid daily for those things, right? And so having um, direct experiences either with private vendors or private prisons, can you speak to the ways that you saw them where profit was the incentive and rehabilitation maybe was second or third down the list?
Well, when you talk about they call these the industrial complexes, right? So when you talk about like for instance where I was, even though it's a public prison as far as Terre Haute was concerned, but you have industries that comes into these prison systems, right? And they'll pay a man 10 cent an hour, 15 cent an hour, and get all that work out of him, right? And then they'll come home and go apply to that same company and they'll use their felonies them not to give them the job when they can make $40 an hour doing it in a free world, but they'll get slave labor for free in the jail system for 10, 15 cent, and he can work as many hours as he wants to. You see what I'm saying? And so, how does this add up? And one of the things I wanted to, you know, what was the population? And these are the thoughts that go in my head. What was the population of prisoners prior to privatization of jails versus once they privatized them and it was big money? Because I guarantee you that population went up when they saw the dollars in it versus when it was no dollars and it was about just total rehabilitation. They wasn't making money as much as they are now. It's always money in prison systems. There's always going to be jobs. There's always going to be industry. But the way and the multi-billion-dollar industry that they created through the commissary, through telephones, because when you think about a prison system, those men have to use the telephone. Those numbers for telephone usage in prisons versus free world are astronomical, bro. So when you talk about big business, just like everything else in the world, the private prisons have their lobbyists in Washington. You feel me? So they getting our politicians to do and sway laws in their favor, and it's like I really need to know that population because I do think it was an incentive, and it's still an incentive to lock them up and throw away the key versus rehabilitation. It's big money in it. I don't see, John, when we were talking and I bring that up, you was like, so what incentive the judges get by locking people up? What incentives do the prosecutors get by locking people up? And I couldn't come up with a good answer. And maybe you guys can answer things like that. Um, but they're part of the system, and some it's some tough questions that need to be answered. But that's one of them, most definitely, Rob. And maybe you could chime in, Rob, to that point.
Yeah, we do know a little bit about the numbers, and it's tough because private prisons increased almost in line with the regular prisons, after the war on drugs, right? So there's the number that we use sometimes when we talk to people is a 1,600% increase between like 1990 and 2005. So, like 160 times the amount of, it's just like a straight line up in terms of the number of people in private prison. Also, the number of people in public prisons also went up. So it's tied together in ways that are tough to disentangle like that, right? Because as you're talking about, the private prison lobbyists go and they both give campaign contributions to people that are going to be tough on crime, and then also lobby for specific things like SB 1070, and those increase public prisons populations just like private prison populations, because, and just like you said, it's not just private prisons where they're making money, right? It's all of these other industries that
It's
are
the whole
inside.
system.
Totally. And then the thing that struck me is, you're telling your story and then talking about the amount of money that phone calls cost, right? Tank was telling us that there was, Tank, when you came out to a bill that was like $600 or $700 or something for just using the phones for a short amount of time that you were inside.
Yeah, just way overcharged, and they speak to like the prison tax, and it's a real thing.
Yeah. And then combine that with the draconian punishment of having a cell phone, right? So take away somebody's ability to communicate with somebody. And then when they do anything in their power to be able to communicate with their family and their friends, you have this contraband cell phone.
Oh yeah, I was in it. I was incarcerated for like 6 7 months for it. No doubt.
So did you, I was trying to see if that was what you said. Were you in solitary confinement for 6 or 7 months just for having the cell phone? That was the punishment for having the contraband?
That's
That is so like it's hard for me to even comprehend the kind of, draconian is the only thing I can think of. It's just like,
It's crazy. Hold on. I have the paperwork in
yeah,
my. I have the paperwork because I was just looking through some stuff, and I tell people I used to keep guns, drugs, and money in my backpacks. Now I keep my hopes and dreams, right? So I always keep a backpack, but so this is a list, right? And y'all couldn't read it, but this is a list where it entailed like phone withdrawal. I was on the phone for like 15 minutes and it took $10. Phone withdrawal $20. Like I don't see the duration, but it was a $20 deduction, a $20 deduction. But your phone calls in the federal system only 15 minutes at a time.
right.
So just imagine a 15-minute call is
Yeah.
$20.
And it costs virtually nothing, right? Like we know the way technology works nowadays, it doesn't cost anything to do a long distance. Like that's not a thing, long distance calls. It reminds me of when cell phones were just coming around. Everybody used to pay 10 cents for a text message, right? Or more, you would have to get these like unlimited packages. Those were free for the phone companies because all they did is as the packets are going through the cell phone system, there's this little extra space at the end, and that's why text messages were 160 characters because that's how much space was free at the end of these packets that were already going through the system. And so they were just like charging people for something that was completely already baked into the system, just a way to extract money for like, no additional cost. And you take that and you amplify it with the fact that somebody doesn't have any choice in the matter because you're inside of a prison. It's not like you can choose which vendor, right? That's one of the weird things that we think about businesses and people.
And the thing about it, if you thought it from a business sense, right? So you would think that the prison complex would lobby to get 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 lower rates because the prisons have to use this phone. So my thing is, if you have to, you would lobby to say, well, all our people are have to use your technology or your service. That will make them have to give less, rates because now you have almost a monopoly because these people not going anywhere, right? And that was the reason. That was part of the reason why when I got to the camp. I use the cell phone. I'm going, my homies, we getting it because that's minimum and they getting cell phones in. So why would I go to this?
How'd you get caught? How'd you get caught?
Well, I'm at the camp, right? So you got people like Ronald Isley, a man, we have a congresswoman by the name of Jan Schakowsky. She has a husband by the name of Robert. Robert, his name is Robert Creamer, right? Been in Washington over 50 years, right? So he was locked up with me, and we just I'm camping, man. I didn't got to the camp. I'm at a minimum. I'm pitching a tent and I'm roasting marshmallows. I'm having a ball, right? And so I got comfortable, man. I was on that cell phone, probably a little louder than what I needed to be, and they showed me real fast that hey, you I got caught and right here this paperwork because it says your work assignment, right? It's inmate history work detail, right? So it says THA, that's Terra Hut, right? Assignment. I was caught in at 10/16/2007, right? I didn't get out of the shoe going to Oklahoma to go to my next spot 05/21/2008.
Yeah,
Jeez.
7 months.
So man, I was comfortable, but it was an experience, and like I said, when I got into that shoe, I knew it was time to change. I couldn't keep on bumping my head like this, like 7 months in the hole. I was just like, oh no, this is, and so by the time I got to the next spot, which was Big Springs, Texas, and I was determined to be the change. I was determined to change, and it ultimately everything that I prayed for, God gave me. And I prayed about like when I talk about you talk about industries. When I talk to young men that's coming out of these prison systems, whether they're private or federal, I tell them, "Hey, look, they can't use your felony to for construction. They cannot use your felony for trucking. They can't use your felony. You've been working out. They can't use your felony against you if you want to be a personal trainer. Hey, bro, do one of these three things because when you talk about these young men after having so much money, because at one point, Tank and I talked to you about this. I was doing $30,000 a day in $10 heroin bags every day, destroying lives, totally destroying lives, and so God took all that away from me, and He gave me. I've been a personal trainer. I've been a I've worked construction. In fact, I've walked. I literally stopped working construction to do the walk, and then I came home, and now I'm a truck driver. So I am the example of the change that I want to see. And ultimately, I'm about to save lives through trucking because I'm about to get these young men with hopelessness in their eyes and guns in their hand and create this organization called Next Generational Truckers and get them in the truck with me and get them out of their environment because a lot of times, man, what I find is it's all boiled down to exposing them to new things and ideas, educating them on it, and showing them the economics behind it. Because these young men is not going to put down their gun if they don't have nothing to replace it with. So and when you talk about the privatization of these prisons, to me, it just then gave everybody incentive, especially big businesses, these big industries, incentives to make law enforcement more tough on crime. So now you have mandatory minimums for non-violent offenses. Come on, man. What do you mean?
It's crazy.
Mandatory minimums for nonviolent offenses?
I
Unless you
got
got, go ahead, Rob.
I got two questions, and one of them is very practical, and one of them is very theoretical. So, I think the walk that you did is such like an interesting. It's like inspiring and courageous that on one hand, and there's also these like, how did you make it happen? Like, were you using Google Maps on your phone? Like, can you talk us through some of the practicalities of doing this? Because it's such like a walk to Washington is such a a big concept, but I'm sure there was planning that went involved and stuff like that. Can you walk us through some of that?
I'm gonna tell you, bro. I came up with this May 28th. That's when I came up with it. Decided my dad's birthday to her in Crawford, right? And I knew I was gonna walk from my grandmother's house on 79th and Kimbar. I knew two things, right? And then I came up with a date. I don't know how it dropped into my spirit or my consciousness or whatever. August 4th, which is Barack Obama's birthday, right? I didn't know none of this. So I only gave myself 2 months to plan. Anybody, if I ask anyone, and I used to often ask people like, well, how long do you think it's going to take to plan a walk from Chicago to the White House? They told me at least a year. I gave myself 2 months. And so, how do you start to walk? You have to walk. So I just got out my bed June 1st and started walking. And I held myself accountable. So the first person I called was my brother-in-law. I told him his name Dwayne, but we call him Nose, right, from the hood, because everybody got a nickname. So Dwayne, which is Nose. So I called him. I say, "Hey, bro, I'm walking to the White House." He like, "What?" Because everybody got to do a double take.
Yeah.
No one. You mean you could drive, you could get on the train, you could get on a plane. You're deciding to walk some damn well. Yeah, I'm walking. So he opened his big mouth. This how I pulled him in. He say, "Man, if you walk, I'm gonna drive behind you." I say, "That's your word?" He like, "Yeah." I say, "Okay." So now I got him holding me accountable. Then I called a few other people and I held myself accountable. And so it picked up traction. So now people are hearing because I'm walking and I'm talking. I'm getting my social media together. So I'm walking, I'm practicing. And because of the protesting and speaking out, I had already done prior, getting Anita Alvarez out of office, which was our state attorney that held the tape, and our chief of police, and all these people, and then ultimately getting Jason Van Dyke convicted. I had a name. So now the news outlets and everybody, I had different relationships with reporters. So by the time I get to August 4th, leaving from my grandmother's house, every major news station is there. So I can't back up. And in the black community, all you hear is, "Man, this damn fool is about to walk. Oh, his feet go be messed up. He go have pus everywhere and this and that." But see, one thing about me, I always look for somebody that did it before me, right? So Pastor Corey Brooks, who is right now on the rooftop tank, Pastor Corey Brooks is once again on the rooftop trying to raise money for a community center for in where a lot of shooting is happening. So he's on a but he had did a walk. So I went to him. "Hey man, tell me about this walk and how you do it." So he told me about, you probably knew it, and of course probably you and John Rob knew about, the special clothing you have to wick the sweat off, and the special socks you had to have to get the moisture so you don't have athlete's feet. And I had no earthly idea what the hell I was doing. But I knew I had to be obedient to God, and I knew it was greater than myself. I'm seeing all these kids being shot, all these things. It was greater than me. And that's the only reason why I didn't turn around. Because one, in our community, your ass turn around, excuse my language, your butt turn around, you are in trouble. Because they don't care what you talking about, you about to be a laughing stock. First of all, they didn't believe your fool butt was about to do this. And then you turned
Right.
around. Oh man.
It's gonna be a whole lot of "I told you so."
Yeah, new nickname.
Man, boy, I knew you wasn't gonna do it. You Nash Gump.
Yeah.
You done watched Forrest Gump and thought you could be a Gump. No, you no. And so it was just great to get myself. So everybody asks me, how do I do it? Well, I'm gonna ask you and John, how do you eat an elephant? How do you eat an elephant? Exactly,
Little
one
piece
bite
at
at
a
a
time, I
time.
guess.
So no matter how daunting the task is, and no matter how big the mountain is, as long as you you can only eat what you can bite. You can't, you know. And so I've mapped out everything in baby steps, edible pieces that I could break down and ultimately eat the whole elephant. And so I broke it down to 20 miles a day because during my walk, the first day I walked, I hit a brick wall. I walked 20 miles that first time I walked, and I knew I couldn't go beyond 20 miles. I couldn't do 20 mile point one. I knew that. So I listened to my body. That was one thing. And then I every day was groundhog day. 20 miles a day, set that marker, go back to hotels, and I had a crew with me. I had a guy named Bodie and Sound Man, so they was my videographers. So I still got a lot of footage of the walk, and maybe you guys, Tank, your people can help me with an NFT. Maybe we can put that as an NFT. And these are the things we got to get an audience in the prisoners. Like, man, think outside the box, bro. You do not want to go back to jail, man. Don't let that be, man. It's so much money and so many things you can do. And if any of your population is actually prisoners, man, I just want to let them know, man, you can do it, man. Get something that, because for me, protesting saved my life. It allowed me to get out my own way. It was something greater than me. Find something greater than yourself, man, and be determined to actually love those that you say you love, and don't put yourself in a position where you take yourself from your family. And so that's what I did, bro. I 20 miles a day. And like you said, how did I do it? I had a nice iPhone, and I pressed Google Maps, and it's a walking icon. And I'd be damned. Every day I got to a marker, I would do it. Cause at first, I thought I was an explorer. I thought I was Jacques Cousteau and some crazy crap. I didn't got the map out, and I'm over to do the map, and I'm going, man, oh, it's too much time. I'm gonna let technology. That's when technology is good. Sometimes technology is bad. This time technology was good. I didn't have to think. It put me on a pedestrian walk, even through the mountains and things of that nature. And it was a dangerous journey, bro. And but I was determined, man, and God and the prayers and I said these people helped me along my way, man. And I was walking for black people because I'm black first, but secondly, I walk for humanity, and I walk for those young men and women that are getting shot down like dogs every day in my community. We could talk about police violence, but we got to look at what we do to ourselves every day, man. And that's the accountability. And me and Tank always talk about that. And that's just human nature. It's easy to point a finger at someone else versus, taking ownership of your craft. It's easier for us to look at, the private prisons and what they doing, but it's kind of harder to hold our community accountable and me as a man. Yeah, somebody told on me, but I had to trust them to be able to tell on me, and I had to be doing the wrong thing to even get locked up. How about that? The population don't continue to grow unless it's people doing the wrong thing. Whether we want to say whatever, yeah, it's bad that they really having free slave labor and all this, but it's a game being played and you continue to play the game. You can't get mad when you get caught.
Yeah, I think that's, for me, that's a good segue into the more theoretical of my two questions. I think so John and I have had this phenomenon happen where we're talking to people about private prisons. And when we go to different groups of people that we're talking to, some of the explanations and the sort of like legal arguments resonate with people more than other people, right? We found that, if we're talking to groups of African American people, we don't have to talk to them very long for them to understand how this is slavery, right?
Right.
And you use this phrase liberation of our people as something that you are like is part of your mission. I
Uh-huh.
wonder if you could explain like why those words, like why liberation, what's the connection for you and that particular word liberation and how prisons operate and like what the world is like right now.
Freedom, like freedom. And when you talk about the liberation of your people, is getting them out of bondage, whether it be bondage of what we do to ourselves and how we perpetuate violence and crime in our community. I just wanted to figure out a way where I could free myself from the mindset. You know what I'm saying? The mindset that allowed me to justify my behavior of selling $3,010 bags every day and justifying it because I'm taking care of my family, but I'm destroying all these other families. It's the liberation of a mentality that perpetuates and makes it seem cool for us to shoot each other the way we do. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, yeah, we're gonna understand it because we came from slavery. Of course, the slave master kids ain't gonna understand the slavery part. That's just not it's just not haven't been in their DNA to think about bondage. you know um and so when you talk about liberation and you talk about a people, man, it's I'm gonna always feel like I need to liberate myself first and foremost, but it's not just the freedom of bondage. Like, I always tell people, jail only had me physically, it never had me mentally. I decided as soon as I got 10 years federal that I was going to be outside of this place with my spirit and my mind. I never got comfortable in jail. A lot of guys get comfortable in that situation. A lot of guys it's just who they are. And it's the liberation of, you got to think, it's been a whole system of red line. And when you talk about Chicago, and Tank can attest to this, Chicago is one of the most segregated cities in America. Period. Hands down. It is. And and that's why a lot of the crime can continue to be perpetuated 15 minutes from Magnificent Mile, and because they feel like it don't touch them until now it is spilling over, because you got to care about humanity. It can't just be you care about white folks in affluent communities or black people in affluent communities, because they look down just as much as they don't want that crime around them. So it's really classism. It ain't so much black and white. It's really classism. It's really a liberation from me looking at you and saying you're a white man and you're poor and I'm poor, but somehow we totally different in America. Nah, we both poor together. And poverty have symptoms. Poverty have the same symptoms. You gonna have poor educational systems in these communities. You gonna have prison from a prison pipeline in these communities. You're gonna have drug abuse in these communities. You're gonna have domestic violence in some of these communities. Whereas um, in the inner city, you have gun violence. In rural America, you have a lot of domestic violence. And I only was able to do this and know this because I walked to be able to talk. I walked through communities that was poverty stricken. For example, I had to use the bathroom along the walk, right? And a white couple came out. They like, we just saw you on the news. You're walking through our community. Oh my God, I love you. And I'm talking about, this woman was so happy to see me. And it just so happened this was the time, Tank, that my family had came. So my mother, my nieces, and my nephews. So because people would come out on the walk just to really see what it was. They wasn't gonna do the whole 8 hours with me, right? But just to see how it was. So this two couple came out, and you could tell they probably suffered from alcoholism. You know what I'm saying? Like, they had some. You can look at a person, and some type of addiction was going on, right? And I said, "Can I use your bathroom?" She felt so bad about letting me use her bathroom, bro. I went in her bathroom. I said, "I don't care. I don't mind." I could actually look up at the sky from her bathroom. So black people and brown people feel like they got a monopoly on poverty in America. There are poor people throughout the country. I'm in Virginia right now, right? You talk about these people that's in these mining communities that once again the EPA or the lobbyists that went against coal mining and all this for other things, right? These people are poor as heck through some of these communities. So when you talk about it, it's a liberation of a poverty stricken mindset that I'm going after, because you got to change the minds of these young people to even get them to think about something different, bro.
There are many ways to get involved with the Prison Cells podcast, build your moral courage, and help us eradicate for-profit prisons in the U.S. Visit abolishprivateprisons.org today and build the momentum of abolishing private prisons by working with an organization to pass a resolution in support of the cause. Get to know the ins and outs of how private prisons operate and why. Outside of the site, you can write your congressperson and shed light on this awful practice. As always, please like, share, and subscribe to the Prison Cells podcast from wherever you listen. Now back to the discussion.
So, Dee, you took a very long and a very public walk from the
Yes,
south
sir.
side of Chicago to Washington, D.C., and you had press conferences along the way. I think it was the mayor of Pittsburgh that
Well, now he's the mayor. He was the state rep. Him and Jake Wheatley and Ed Gainey gave me a proclamation of recognition from the entire state of Pennsylvania.
that's terrific. And so by the time you got to Washington, D.C., like you say, things had snowballed,
Yeah.
including from a publicity standpoint. But
Yes, sir.
your goal was to get to the White House and to the steps of the Capitol,
Mhm.
where, for example, you met with John Lewis and
Yeah,
others.
incredible. Robin Kelly,
So
Jan Schakowsky, Danny Davis, Bobby Rush.
my question is, who did you meet at the White House, and what was the message you conveyed, and what did you hope to accomplish when you talked to our
Well,
nation's leaders?
Well, more so it was, I'm from Chicago, so I really wanted to make sure that I got to talk to our specific congressmen and women, right? And more so than anything, it was mainly first and foremost to bring awareness to the gun violence that was tearing down our community. First was police violence, and then, like I said, what we were doing ourselves. So I accomplished that. The second goal was to position myself to be able to go in rooms that I wasn't privy into and represent a young, black, intelligent, articulate black man, and that didn't have to always scream, yell, and allow America to look for the angry black man in the aha moment. I wanted to be able to tailor my message to those that could receive it, because a lot of times I find that we want to say the things the way we want to say it and just get it out. But if your audience isn't receptive to the message and the way you're delivering it, you're not going to get their ear, and you're not going to get a result anyway, because they're going to close you out immediately. So, so all those things were accomplished, and um, more so at that point, I was looking to do something called replace guns with hammers, and that was trying to get these young men into the construction trades, and just talk about how we needed more vocational skills in our schools, because they Tank can attest to this. In our high schools, we used to have a lot of vocational skills, so a lot of the young men that weren't going to college would still have a livable wage by going into auto mechanics, or right now diesel mechanics would be good, or being a carpenter, or being these are things that our high school used to teach them, being plumbing and stuff like that, so they could be of just getting out of high school and going into a $30, $40 an hour job in construction. And so, when you talk about kids that weren't, football players and what didn't have aspirations of going to college, there's been a void in our community. So now those young men are going to the streets. And so that was one of my big asks about, bringing vocational skills back to the community, and just being able to position myself to be in these rooms and be a bridge from the streets to academics. Because a lot of times what I also find is it'd be like the streets versus academics instead of us working together. Like the organizations go at each other. You'll have an academic person that feel like they didn't did all this education and they got their master's degree and they didn't came up with an organization, but they don't even know the boots on the ground piece, which is you can have a great organization in our community and you can have a brick and mortar that's 2, 3 blocks away from your target group, and you don't know why they not never coming. Well, those young men and women can't walk past those 2 blocks. They got to walk 3 blocks up and 2 blocks and just to get around that. But they'll never get to your organization, and this is why we need each other. This is why we need private, um, private prison system and those people to understand it's not just a lock them up and throw away the key. We need each other. We need to have real conversations. So, I met I met some of my goals. Of course, it's still a work in progress, and that's why I came up with next generational truckers to be able to do and get these young men out of the streets and with guns in their hands and hopelessness in their eyes and into this truck so I could give them some life skills, and they're never going to see a person, any of their enemies, all the way in Virginia, where I'm at right now. You're not going to see nobody from Chicago. You're not going to see your ops, as they call them right now. You're not going to see no one that you go feel like you need to have a gun for. So, it's just solutions, man. Everything that I do is solution based. And I just want the best for everybody. And having been a part of the problem, I'm obligated to fix what I helped break, and that's just how I am. But I'm also calling on people and organizations, the athletes and Tank and his crew and all my relationships to say, man, look, I need y'all to empower me. Where y'all can't be, y'all money can. Where you can't be, your resources can. Do I want Tank Johnson to go in the O block with me? Now Tank can and he will. But do I want him to put himself at risk like that? I don't think so. I'd rather him be in the NFL, in those corporate offices, and being able to extract the monies that we need to get to in the right hands. And that's how we got to work this thing.
Well, D, I wanted to thank you so much for joining us. You mentioned your nonprofit that you're working on. Is it ready to share
Yeah.
if people want to learn about it? What's the best place to find that kind of
Um,
stuff?
not all the way. They can, anyone that wants to talk to me about the work that I do, just email me and we'll go from there. I'm right now setting up that part, the nonprofit and get the business side of it taken care of. But it got to start with an idea and then you got to do the work. And before I even get the organization, I'm gonna put a young man in the truck with me, on my own dime, because I know it's just what's needed, man. So they can catch me. They can contact me at Nash Global, NASHGLOBAL, the number three, the number five at gmail.com. And if they want to support me, let's have a real conversation. I only have one number. I don't have Google Voice numbers and none of that. And one thing I know, if I'm not who I am and you're not who you are, it's a great button on these phones that can press block. And I can get away from you and you can get away from me. But, it's just time for real solutions. It's time to have real heart to heart conversations about privatization of the prisons and the incentives and the destruction that's going on, and the fact that we're not rehabilitating these young men to be productive citizens and women to come back and be productive citizens and come and change lives. And it's just not happening. They're banking on the recidivism rate that you're gonna be back, and we're gonna get some more money, and you're gonna have to buy a Snicker that would cost um $5.50, you're gonna have to buy it for $1.50, $2. And it's big business.
Yep, absolutely. And from Tank and from John, thanks for joining us. And for everybody that's listening, please remember to leave a review and share it with your friends, because it's really about getting these messages out to people and sharing the experiences, letting people know what's going on. And we'll see you next time.